Hello and welcome to the SMU Video Archive Series. In this series we interview people from the SMU community who can provide insights into the history of SMU, especially from their perspective of the time at the university. Now, some people make a name for themselves after they graduate from SMU. Others bring their talent to SMU and pass along their knowledge to the SMU community. My name is Dave Sedman, and with us today is someone who fits in both categories. He is legendary TV producer Bob Banner. And Bob, thank you so much for being here today.
Sure.
Bob, you obviously got your college career started here at SMU, and I was kind of hoping you could tell us about your first visit to SMU and then what your SMU career was like.
Well, my first visit was to meet with Frank Malone, who was the director of the Mustang Band, and the high school band director in Ennis, Texas, had recommended that I come here and be given a scholarship to arrange for the band and play in the band. And I didn't know that had been done, and out of the blue he called to ask for an interview, and I had no idea why. But I was thrilled that our local band director had recommended it. I met with him and was given a scholarship, and I never considered another university because no other university offered me a scholarship. So I came here.
Mm-hmm. And who were some of the teachers who inspired you, and what did they bring to the table?
Well, I think probably he inspired me most. I guess you would call him a teacher because he was the band director, and he taught a couple of classes in music, whatever, appreciation, or I don't even remember the names of them. As a matter of fact, I didn't take one of the courses from him because I was in the band and knew him and was in a way working for him when I came because I was under his supervision. And there were other people. I was interested in entertainment, knew that that's what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do in entertainment, but I had played piano, played in the high school band, and I organized an orchestra in high school. I can't imagine what it sounded like, but we thought we were terrific. And so I was always interested in any of the entertainment courses, or not only the courses, because there really weren't too many, frankly. That's the reason I eventually went to Northwestern University for graduate work, because I didn't feel we had enough practical arts classes here. But at any rate, Mary McCord she seemed to me, she was ancient when I was here, but of course at that time I thought anybody over 30 was on their last legs. So she came to a program that we were doing. It was a group called Script and Score, and we produced a live musical every semester, not television, it was just theater. And we thought we were terrific, as you feel at that age that you've already learned most everything that needs to be learned. And so I asked her to come to it because I really respected what she had said. I didn't take any class from her, but every show that was done here, even if I was pulling curtain, that I would be involved in it. And I asked her to come to see the Script and Score performance that year. And I asked her to come to a dress rehearsal. And I said, well, what did you think, Miss McCord? And she said, well, it's a disaster. It's a total disaster. Your script has no structure to it. The program has no structure. And she's the first person that I'd ever known that talked about structure of entertainment. And I used to go and think about next year's show, and I would go and sit and talk to her, and she was truly a wonderful lady. Everybody made fun of her because she seemed to be so old, but she was bright and sharp and taught me a lot. I think she and Frank Malone were the two mentors that I had here.
Mm-hmm. And so obviously you decided you're going to go on for another degree and go to Northwestern at this point?
Well, I went into the Navy in the meantime.
Mm-hmm.
SMU became a V7 university, and that meant that either you joined the Navy in their program, which was called V7, or you were drafted. And most people joined V7 because they almost promised you an officership instead of simply being enlisted, but they gave you some training here. So I had no choice except to go into the Navy. I was pleased that I did because I always had clean sheets at night. We were not having to camp out in the mud, so I found it, a wonderful experience. But then when I came back, I realized that I hadn't had enough theater and music training. They had a music school, but it was mostly classical. I think in the practice rooms, if you played a pop tune, it would ring an alarm, and they would come in and ask you to leave because everything had to be classical. So I felt that I needed more, and Northwestern had a wonderful school of music and theater. So I went to grad school, and while I was there, I decided that maybe I would teach. And I started teaching at Northwestern.
Mm-hmm. And something that you passed along, before we started taping, we were at lunch one day, and you talked about how you were you wanted to teach. You were at Northwestern, and I think you were working on the Kukla, Fran, and Ollie show, and this kind of has a bearing on how you started your TV career, and also how you came back to teaching. I was wondering if you might be able to pass that story along again.
Well, I did work on the Kukla, Fran, and Ollie show. Most people today don't know what that was unless they are a student of television history, but it was a puppet show. And I had I started into television, and I have to give credit to that, to Northwestern University, because the head of the department there said, "You're the youngest faculty member, why don't you go down and get a job in this new thing called television, because it's probably going to amount to something." And we've already started to think about the fact that in some 2 or 3 years, we're probably going to have to start a course in television here at Northwestern. And if you go down and get a job, and I said, "Well, how am I going to get a job?" And he said, "Just any job, just to be in it and around it. And you can start a survey of television, even if it's a survey from the sweeper's standpoint, if no one else knows anything about it." And so I did go down and apply for a job to a new station that was coming on the air in about 5 months. And I thought I would get an application in early. And I didn't hear from them. And so I thought that they just didn't think I was really qualified to start in television. And then Christmas Eve, if that's what it's called, 2 days before Christmas, I got a call when we came back. We were dragging a Christmas tree into our apartment there. And I was living at the Northwestern apartments because I was on the teaching faculty, but I was still working on my PhD. And we hurried into the apartment and answered the phone, and it was a secretary from station WMAQ in Chicago. And she said, "We've been trying to reach you all day. We want you to come in for an interview." And I said, "Well, I'll be glad to come in. Right after Christmas or New Year's?" And she said, "No, now." Well, it was 7:30 at night. And I said, "Well, I'm out here. I'll have to catch the North Shore train down to the Merchandise Mart, which is where they were located." And she said, "Well, that's okay. Can you be here by around 9 o'clock? And I thought, this sounds like a strange industry, that's calling me like this, and it's just 2 days before Christmas. And so I went down, and they said, "You've been selected to be a production assistant here at the station, and you'll report to work to get all your information to the business office tomorrow, and your first show is tomorrow night." And I said, "Well, in the application, they said that we would be taught about television." And they said, "Well, you'll learn. Don't worry." So I had no television instruction, but I had only 1 day's notice before I did a show. And they said, "You'll help stage manage." That was my introduction to television. I thought, surely it will improve as it goes along, but I never found that it did. You were always wishing you knew more than what you knew. But I realized that if you wanted to know everything there is to know about courses that are taught, or television, or radio, or theater, you wouldn't start to work until you were 92. So it was sort of a what the hell attitude. You know, nobody else knows any more about it than this, so I will just start. And I took that attitude, and it saved my life, because you think you get nervous doing the first show, and the first show was simply a disaster. I had very little to do with it. As a matter of fact, they said, you'll report to the Navy Pier in Chicago, and we're going to photograph their Christmas show, because then it was Christmas Eve. And yes, I said, oh, all right. Where do I go? And they said, well, just go onto the Navy Pier and ask where the television truck is, and go to it, and around there somewhere on the ground will be some headphones with your name on it. And you pick up the headphones, and they'll take it from there. You just report in. So I did. I got there a little bit early and looked around, and it was all kind of magical and mystical to me, and anything that was a show always interested me. So I did find the headphones, and I put them on, and it was chaos on the phones. And I kept trying to break in and say, I'm reporting in, because they were all talking, and where's the thing, where's another electrical outlet, go call it. So I finally reported in. They said, oh, okay, fine, Banner, we'll get back to you. Just, and then they came back one time and said, hey, Banner, are you still there? And I said, yes. They said, find out when this thing's going to start. And I said, well, who do I ask? Do I have a name? They said, no, just find out. And there was nothing happening, because they'd taken a break, the people who were doing the show and performing in the show. I'd always been a musician, and there was an orchestra set up, and I figured they can't start until the orchestra's in place and the music's ready to go. So I wandered over to the band, to the orchestra players, and made friends, and said, when do you think this is going to start? And they said, well, we're on a break, and you know the old bit when the director comes out and claps his hands while we all go and get seated. And I said, well, where is he? And they said, well, he's not here now, but we'll try to let you know. And I kept checking back with him. And finally, I saw all the orchestra members scrambling to their seats. And I said, this is Banner. I think they're going to start in about 3 to 5 minutes. And they said, thanks, good going. And they did start, and it was a shambles. I think we photographed more stage crew than we did performers. When I say we, I was just on the phones. They never said one word to me after that. They photographed the show, and I tried to peek at a monitor that was over outside the truck here and there. Was not too impressed with the pictures, because first of all, I don't know how many viewers, because they just had not even gone on the air until the 1st of January, and I found out what the rush was. The FCC said, if you're not on the air by January 1st, your license is revoked. And that's the reason they were interviewing us at Christmas Eve and rushing out to do a show. This went on the air, and I've often wondered where they even had as many as 50 viewers. There was no announcement, no anything. They just went on the air. And I said, well, someday television will get organized. I was so wrong.
Yeah, it sounds like the same story as HGTV today, you know, where there's very few people watching, but the stations had to get on the air by a certain date.
And I was still teaching at Northwestern, and when I got home, my wife said, well, we didn't have a television set. And she said, well, what was it? How did it go? And I said, I don't really know. And she said, what did you do? And I said, well, I gave them a 3-minute warning when it was going to start. And she said, and what else? And I said, that's all I did. I wore the earphones, and I have never heard such chaos in my life as was on the headsets for that show. We decided right then and there that I wouldn't quit my job at Northwestern. I got them to let me teach in the morning and work in the afternoon, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen with that industry. But it was the most wonderful learning experience I've ever had. We just had to do, and they never gave us one day's instruction. We just did shows. And the people who had some vision or were not afraid of what to do, just to take charge and do something, survived, and the rest of them left, and they were placed with other people. And they ended up with a bunch of terrific people. They ended up with survivors who could manage to exist in that setup.
Well, what pulled you away from teaching altogether at Northwestern and into the TV career that you went into?
Well, I was working there at the station, and it was the most wonderful training I could ever have. Instead of just sitting in a classroom and memorizing a list of 5 things you do in a situation, you just learn by doing. It's not that I recommend that, but it was wonderful for those of us who really took advantage of that. And we did everything. They never felt, we never felt a designation of the director was different from the stage crew. Mm-hmm. One day I would be assigned to makeup, the next day to stage managing, help in the shop to see that a set was going to be flexible and could be moved into the studio, and it was wonderful training. And they finally said, you're going to be assigned to a show. And I thought, well, that's neat. And because I was going to tell the people at Northwestern, their theater department was a very theater department. Mm-hmm. They were very, very, they felt high class. And they were. They were a fine theater department, probably one of the top 3 in the country at that time. And so I couldn't wait to tell them I was really going to work on a show, because I'd really mostly been running errands and doing things. And I said, well, what's the name of the show? And they said, well, it's a puppet show. And I thought, oh my, I can't tell the faculty at Northwestern that I'm working on a puppet show. That'll be shameful. So I tried to keep it a secret, sort of, as to what I was doing. And the Fran, the singer, and the Bert Hilton, the puppeteer, were fantastic. I don't know why I thought they would be so ignorant and so lowbrow but they knew about everything. They made fun of opera, theater, politics, whatever. And I soon learned that you have to have really almost more knowledge than being in one of those fields if you're going to make fun of it. You have to do a comedy sketch. You have to be very literate about the subject. But they went on the air, and they were an instant hit. So, of course, I went around Northwestern saying, I'm working on the Kukla, Fran, and Ollie show, because it was the most viewed show in Chicago. And that's really the way I just found out. I didn't know what I was to do on that. And they said, well, you're going to do makeup, among other things, because we're going to have guests on the show. And named guests like to go on puppet shows, I find, because they can be rude to the puppeteers, or the puppets can be rude to them. You can say things to a puppet that you can't say things to people. And the puppets can say things to you and get away with it. So it was really fun to be on the show. And one of the things I learned being getting the makeup, I would say I really wasn't in the makeup department, because there were no such thing as departments. They just assigned us. You'd look at your schedule and see what you were to do that day. And one of the interesting things I found was that people, while they're sitting in the makeup chair, it's very much like sitting in a barber chair or in a hairdresser's chair. They will tell you the damnedest things, personal things about their life. I just didn't expect that. And some of the guest stars on the show, one of them was a fellow who was MC and director of the Chesterfield Supper Club, which was a very popular radio show at the time. His name was Fred Waring, and his organization was Fred Waring and his Pennsylvanians. He graduated from Penn State. And he sat down in the chair. He said, I love Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. And I sat down, and he said, oh, I've had a terrible day. The damn musicians union has been causing me a lot of problems. And he said, and I'm getting a divorce, and I'm having all sorts of mess, and we're suing each other, and this has just been a hellish day. And I thought, what's he doing telling me that? I'm here to put makeup on. And I couldn't make him sit still enough to get the makeup on because he was steamed up about things. And among other things, he said, and I've been, General Electric has been bothering me so much because they want me to do a television show and translate somehow the Chesterfield Supper Club that we have done, which was sponsored by Chesterfield Cigarettes, of course. And I don't know anything about television, and he said, do you like it? And I said, well, yeah, I like putting on makeup, but I get to do a few other things here. And he said, we're an organization for the ears, not for the eyes. We do records and radio. And he said, I don't think we'd be good in television. And I said, why not? I've seen your radio show because I was in the Navy and I went to see it in New York. They did it in a little theater just off Times Square. I thought your organization was terrific. And he said, do you really think they'd be good on television? And I said, well, among other things, you have the prettiest girls I've ever seen in an organization. I later found out he had an eye for the girls in the organization and out of the organization, but nevertheless, he said, well, you really think so? And I said, yes. And then it was about time for the show, and he did the show, and about 2 months later, 6 weeks or so, or 8 weeks later, he came back on the show. He was on a cross-country tour with his organization, with the musicians and singers. And on the way back, he stopped off to do the show again. And he sat down this time, and instead of telling me about his divorce and other things, he said, did you really think we would be good on television? And I said, I think you'd be terrific. I can't imagine it wouldn't be terrific. And he said, you know, I've been thinking about what you said, and to hear you say it again, maybe I should do television. How would you like to come to New York and be my television director? Well, I was just stunned because I had not been doing much directing, just here and there, a news show or whatnot. And I said, well, I would like to. That would be thrilling. It would be an honor. But I still have 2 months running on my teaching contract at Northwestern University. I could come in 2 years, and I'd love to come then. And he said, well, how naive can you be? I don't know what I'm doing 13 weeks from now because we all work in radio on 13-week contracts. And I said, well, I don't know. I think I'd love to come. I just don't know about that with the contract because I have one. And the next day, Bert Tilstrom and Fran Allison, the Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, their puppet names, said, how would you like to go to dinner tonight? And I thought, what is this? Here, I just have been minding my business doing the makeup in here and haven't really been. They said, we'll take you to dinner. And they brought their manager, whose name was Beulah Zachary. I'll never forget that dinner. And we sat down to have dinner, and she said, listen, they asked me to come here because I just wanted to tell you, what kind of fool are you telling Fred Waring you can't come to New York? You're young and you have to get started in this business, and this is an opportunity, and you should go to New York. And I said, well, but Miss Zachary, I have a contract out there. And she said, contract schmontract, what are you talking about? You've got to go. And I said, but I can't. I have to. I guess I was naive about it, and I couldn't go and ask Northwestern if I could go or wanted to cancel my contract because I wasn't sure that I was going to stick with this industry. And the next day, the dean of theater called me into his office and said, two people that I don't know, Bert Tilstrom and Fran Allison, called, and they told me that you had a wonderful opportunity. And I've been thinking about it, and I want you to promise me one thing, and I'll make a deal with you. He said, if you promise that after you've been in the business about 20 years that you'll start teaching again, just teaching while you work, and teach for the rest of your life, then I'm going to tear up your contract. You ought to go to New York. Isn't it funny that it was Burr and Fran that I was kind of ashamed to be working with that changed my life? And so he did tear up the contract, and I did go to New York, and that's how I started to really decide to stay in the business. As a matter of fact, I went to meet with him. He said, we're going to be in St. Louis, and gave me a date. It was about a couple of weeks away. And you come there, I'm going to be meeting with the sponsor and with the network, which was CBS. And we can outline the deal, when you start and how it's going to work and all, if you come there, and that way you can think about it. I was still troubled because that meant moving. We just had our first child, and it meant moving to New York. And the deal was for 13 weeks. And I thought that was pretty chancy. I couldn't make up my mind about it because my deal with Northwestern, which was not paying me a fortune, but it was a firm deal for 2 years. And I went there to meet with them, and I had breakfast, and I was trying to think how it was going to work. We were going to have a 10 o'clock meeting, and I was having breakfast there in the hotel. And before I went, I looked on the front page of the paper, and it had a little squib down in the corner that they found out about the water shortage in St. Louis. They'd been losing water pressure. The pumps would quit working, and nearly every week they were losing water pressure. And they found out what it was. They lost water pressure on Tuesday night, and it really affected industry there, and the town, the whole city was in an uproar about it. And they found that there was only one television station, and Milton Berle's Texaco Star Theater was on Tuesday night. And so many people watched that when they had their first commercial break, they all went to the bathroom at the same time. And that's how they lost the water pressure. And I just reasoned that if television could cause them to lose water pressure in St. Louis, they could soon start losing water pressure all over the country. And I went to the meeting and said yes, I would go to New York, and I did.
Well, that's terrific, and a good move, because this is the fast forward part. If we asked you about everything that happened in the career, as you noted, that we'd have to record in 78 and play it back in 33 or vice versa, however that works out. But yes, you went on, obviously, to direct Dinah Shore, created Showtime at the Apollo, Star Search, Solid Gold. People probably heard of the Carol Burnett Show. You've won 9 Emmy Awards, 5 Peabodys. You've been in the TV industry 7 decades. Bob Banner and Associates, your company has been around longer than any independent production company in television history. Yet, the question I've got to ask, why'd you come back to SMU? You made the commitment, obviously, to stay in teaching from Northwestern, but why did you come back to SMU?
He said you would start to work in television wherever you were, would start teaching. And I really took that agreement seriously. And I said I would teach, and I started teaching 20 years after I was in the business, and I've taught since then. I've been teaching now. I've taught here at the SMU for, about 14 years or so. And I taught at Northwestern, and I did lectures before that, before I started to work full-time like I did here, of teaching I taught a double course. That meant that I came here on Friday noon and taught from then until Sunday night every third week, and that made up for all the hours difference in teaching, a regular course here. And I did the same thing at Northwestern when I was there. I tried to do work there in Chicago. Here I had to commute because there was no television being done from Dallas here, or no television that I could participate in.
Mm-hmm.
News and other things were certainly being done, but I was interested in doing drama and variety shows, and so I had to commute to come here to SMU. But I took that obligation because if I would probably have gone into television because I loved it, working in it, even though it was chaotic. It was just magical and mystical to me. They didn't change my career to go into television. They just boosted along and speeded it up. I think they speeded up into that one move probably saved me 3 or 4 years of getting to that same position. And I've always been grateful to Fred Waring that he asked me to come and work as director when I had a makeup experience with him only. It was very strange. But he just said, television is a young industry, and most people don't know much about it, and you seem to understand what we do, so why not? A lot of people don't take that chance.
Right, and you did, and obviously learning the craft over many decades. What did you do that you brought from the industry and created the SMU Television Workshop, or the Bob Banner Workshop, however you want to phrase that? What was the concept behind that?
Well, Gene Bonelli, who was then Dean of Meadows, came to Los Angeles and came to my office and met with me, with Bill Jones, who was a teacher here at that time, and asked me to come and if I could take a leave of absence and take a sabbatical, as he called it, and come and teach here for a year. And I said, well, I have a television company. I don't know how to take a sabbatical from a company, because most of it are things that I do. I'm involved in everything we do. The weekend that he was there, he said, well, can we meet on Saturday afternoon and Sunday and try to think about how you could teach? And I said, well, I can't. At that time, we were getting ready to do a show in the Soviet Union. We were going to do a special with Peggy Fleming, who had just won the Olympics, the skating. And so I wanted to learn enough Russian to get by. I always find it so embarrassing that we don't know other languages in this country. And when we go abroad, we expect them to be able to speak English to communicate with us. And I was studying Russian, and Berlitz School of Languages, which is all over the country, I guess. I've never worked with them except in New York and LA. But they teach a semi-immersion course where they guarantee that you can speak street language. You can't talk about Marcel Proust or something, but you can speak street language in 10 weeks. And a teacher comes to your doorstep at about 5 o'clock on Friday and stays with you the entire weekend. They take a break, and another teacher comes in, and they each work a half day, but they live with you. You have to take them to dinner or serve them dinner at your home. Wherever you are, you have to take them, and you have to guarantee that you won't speak a word of English during that time. You will speak only the language. I took both German and Russian from Berlitz. And I told him what we were doing. And as I was telling him, I said, you know, Gene, could I teach on that basis at SMU? Because I have to be out here for work. But I could come in on Friday and teach until Sunday and have the university feed the students, because we don't give them a lunch break. We go right straight through. They get their lunch and bring it in and put it on the little chair, and we continue. Because I would just cram all the time in and teach 18 hours in that weekend. And it works in, because I'd taken a German course that way, and it really worked like a charm. And I think it works better. You go straight through, and I would want them to do practical things. That's the way I learned television. I never took a television course. And I would like to teach it more by doing than just by lectures. And he agreed to it, and that's what we did. That's the way I started teaching, but they always worked on shows. We wrote shows and produced them and did 2 a year, because I felt that doing it was, to me, half the battle, because that's the way I'd learned. I had never taken a course, so I thought, well, I'm not going to start out with just lectures. We're going to plan and do shows and let them do all the positions and work on it. And he said, that sounds good to me, and that's the way it started. It was just that simple. If I hadn't been taking that Berlitz course, I don't know that I would ever have been able to start here, because I taught some at UCLA, and that was right there underfoot, and it was different from having to commute here to do it.
Right, and for the division, which was the radio television department at the time, that would be considered what we would call a capstone course. Now it's really it was a year-long course starting in the fall semester with an interim where the students went out to California to make some contacts, and the spring was very much into production and post-production, and then exhibition showing what it was that you had done, which was a terrific program. I think it worked out very well.
When they came to LA, we each year had 25 people from the industry come and speak to them. And you couldn't do that here because you couldn't get them to fly in. The flying in takes more time than the 2 hours you're going to spend with them. So there I had them, and half the time when they arrived, we weren't sure which ones were going to be speaking to them or visiting with them, or take them to their production that they were working on and let them see firsthand. But it gave them a lot of contacts. When I finished teaching that time, there were 38 SMU students working in Hollywood after that had taken the course.
Wow.
So I was very proud of them, and they went out and started, and I think meeting the people realized that you can't know everything about television. You just have to start in and learn the things that you need to do the job that you're doing there, and they weren't afraid to go out there and work, and I thought it was the way I had learned. That's what I knew to teach.
And I know that some of the skills that they got in the class, for instance, they 1 year, I think the first year I was here, Stephen Sondheim had received the Meadows Award, and the people from your class were very instrumental in putting together a special that kind of documented that event, and that was shown on A&E. It was very successful. And then another year, Paul Taylor was a Meadows Award recipient, and the students did a fabulous job of putting together that program as well, which got a contract with Bravo, if memory serves. So they definitely got good reels. The students got what would be considered a good reel or their demo material to leave here, which I think is terrific.
Well, there were two people that really made all that happen. One was Curtis Meadows, who was the contact with the Meadows Foundation here, and Gene Benelli. And they worked well together about setting this up that we could handle the Meadows Award. And when both of them left, Curtis Meadows left to take a job in Washington, I believe, in setting up foundations like Meadows. And Gene Benelli left to become the president of the Dallas Symphony. And when they left, that just kind of faded away. It wasn't canceled, it didn't have the two people who made it happen. When they left, it went away. I think they still do a Meadows Award, don't they? But
Yeah, they sure do.
It was just a major television thing, and it aired on PBS here too.
That's right.
They had,
and local PBS aired a number of the student programs too, if I'm not mistaken.
not a number. They aired maybe 1 in 4 or 5 because
that's still a number.
Well, some of them weren't. You know, every year we'd do 2,
right?
And sometimes we'd have one that was really terrific and one that was a total bomb. But everybody has to fail at one time or another in this business. It's your batting average that is important. And you mentioned the shows that I did. It's only because I've been in the industry too damn long. It's not a matter of getting all those at one time. It's spread out over a long period of time. And having been in the business for over 50 years, if you haven't done something, you couldn't stay in the business. So.
Well, Gene Benelli said of you, is a quote, Bob Banner is one of the most successful television producers and has a great flair for teaching. The success of his students in film and the arts is a testament to the quality of his course. His students consistently told me they believed his course was the most valuable in their college career. I'm wondering, who are some of the people that you remember from the program here that may have gone on to do some notable things?
Well, Don Weiner is produced, and actually I met him at Northwestern, because part of the time I was teaching here, I was also teaching at Northwestern because I felt like I should, since I'd made the agreement there. And some weekends when I would come out here, I would go right back by Northwestern, and I was teaching a course there too. But Don Weiner has directed now, I would say, over well over 100 shows, a lot of specials, and he worked with us on things that we did. A couple of things that we did really won awards that he had directed. He never won a directing award per se. Steve Stark has been production manager of Paramount for years, and one of the girls in the class is now the head of the literary department at ICM, which is one of the two largest talent agencies. Those are examples of ones that have been in the business long enough that they have moved up to that. They didn't go to those jobs when they graduated, but they were in the business after about 10 years and moved up.
Yeah.
And that was one of the wonderful things that happened to me, is that I was able to jump over a lot of that, because I had hardly stage managed over about 5 shows when I was jumped to director, and normally that's a good 3 to 5 year stint in the business to make that leap. So I was lucky, and at a time when television was expanding so fast, I found that if you could remember your name, you could get a job in television, and if you could spell it correctly, you were guaranteed a promotion in a month. So it was that sort of thing that really helped me move along fast. That was luck and the state of the industry at the time. There were other people around who didn't know any more than I did about it, so you had kind of an equal chance to jump in and do things. I was asked to teach when I was in the Navy. I was held over from, I taught CIC work, Combat Information Center work, and I was held over at the school to teach for one of their sessions, which was about 2.5 months, and then went on and was assigned to a ship. And the course that they had me teach was not for people who were going to do combat information work. They were for captains and whatnot who needed to know enough about how it worked to do their job on the ship, and gunnery directors and all. And most of them were lieutenants, captains, a couple of commodores, and I said, well, how can I teach them? You know, because I was a lowly Lieutenant JG. And I approached the first sessions kind of warily, wondering, you know, because if I made a misstep, the Navy was very strict, and it seemed to me they were. And so I started out and I said, listen, I know that there must be hundreds of people who know more about this than I do. But since I see none of them present, let me tell you what I know about it. And there would always be a good laugh. And from then on, I was able to work well with them. And I took that attitude in television. You'd look around and say, well, there's nobody else who knows much more, so why should I be afraid to make a decision and move along? It was doing it that way, I think, increased my making a decision ability, because you're always wondering, you know, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? And I soon found that the worst decision to make is no decision. Mm-hmm. You have to make a decision to have everyone move along on the project. It was a real eye-opener for me about that, and gave me a lot of confidence that I wonder if I would have had if I hadn't been forced into those situations.
Mm-hmm. Well, and something that I've known you since '94 when I first started teaching here at SMU, and about 1997, we saw some digital production tools, especially some digital cameras that we were very interested in bringing to the department. And there was a guy by the name of Eric, who was a student here, who was interested in these as well. And he kind of talked to me and said, hey, you know, these would be interesting to bring into the program. And you did a program with Taka, I think, bringing in some newscasters that the organization actually donated money, and you actually got to start on the digital path here with these digital cameras, which I've always been very appreciative of. It's like you said, sometimes you just have to make a decision. You said, I think these cameras are ready for this program. I think they're going to make a difference, and they have. And in fact, some of those cameras are still in use. They were all still in use at the beginning of this school year, and we've just replaced them with a newer model. But you really, I don't even know if you know that, but you got to start on the digital path here, which has been an amazing thing for the divisions, both for journalism and for TV radio.
Were you mentioning Eric Hutchins?
Eric Hutchins, yeah.
He was a wonderful student. I should have mentioned him. He's working in, is he still working in Florida? He's been producing and directing and writing, and he seems to be not afraid to go ahead and do it. And
that's right.
He graduated and got started in the business fairly quickly.
Yeah, and a number of people have that I know of who were in your class that have done very, very well as well. I don't want to go into too many of those. Actually, what I'd like to talk about is, you know, you went away for a little bit from SMU and you're back, and I want to talk about your current class, the screenwriting class, and kind of the technology that you bring to that. Because one of the things that has always impressed me about you is that not only do you make decisions, but you make decisions vision forward, as opposed to saying, well, this is what I've done in the past and I'm going to do it the same way. And can you tell me a little bit about this screenwriting class?
I'm teaching that in the informal studies division, the lifetime learning, and it's difficult to teach production in a class like that, because when we were teaching production here, we drew on people around and some from other departments, which was the whole idea of Meta School of the Arts, was to mix all of the arts classes and subjects in one pot, so to speak, and you could draw on it and get actors from the theater division. I don't like the name division. I think that divides it up. I wish they found some. It was not division before. They called them departments, but isn't it division now?
It is a division.
Anyway, I think that's divided metas. And somehow, I think you have to jump ahead. The one thing that I've learned is that is constant in the industry. The only constant I've ever found is change. Because you think of things you want to do, and if you can't do it technically, and you say we need to be able to do this, if it's not possible, then it's likely that it'll be possible by tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. The industry moves so fast that I've found of all the time I've been in the industry, just keeping abreast of the industry has been one of the biggest chores. I go to conventions and various things that are talking about new equipment and new techniques. That's not new. The medical profession does that. They encourage doctors to go and have a renewal every 2 or 3 years on updated medical practices. I find that most important because I was getting together a show that we had done in 1979. Just the past 2 weeks I've been working on it because I don't like to produce many shows. I feel that I have semi-retired and I like to still teach because I promised Northwestern I would teach as long as I was around and doing anything else that I would also teach. But we were getting together a show, and it was 1979, and I started to look at it, and the tape froze. And I thought, oh my, this is a show that's really important. There are a lot of important people on this show, and they wanted it to be aired again and made use of. And I quick called Los Angeles to the Producers Film Center, which houses films and tapes, keeps them the right temperature and all those things. And I said, would you check it was a 2-hour show, would you check the first hour, because the copy that I have here froze after about 15 minutes. They later found that in 1979-80, they glued the soundtrack onto tape. I had no idea that that's what had happened, because I didn't even know they glued it on, but they did, and it melted at a certain point and got goo all over it, and they couldn't get rid of the glue and undo it. So I said, would you go and check what you have? They had a master and a submaster. They checked the master, and the goo had gotten on the tape in the second hour. And they checked the submaster. Well, long story, we had to put 3 different tapes together to make a full show, because they don't glue the soundtrack to the tape anymore. It's all part of it, and it's digital, and you just, but that's what we had at that time, and you can't sit around saying, well, I'll wait until the industry technically is perfect. If you did the same thing with a car, during the times that they had a Model T Ford, you would not have bought one and say, I'm going to wait until 2003 when the models are much better. And you would have walked all that time. So you have to use the industry as it exists at the time and keep track of what can happen.
Yeah,
next day.
Quite frankly, nobody would own a computer right now, would they? I mean, they still aren't quite perfect, but you kind of got to get in there.
I remember when one of the worst jobs I had as a production assistant was to type the scripts, the outlines for them, because there was no computer, and we had to buy paper that had 3 to 5 copies on it, with a carbon paper already in it. You just put the paper in the typewriter. And if you needed it for a lot of people, including an engineering department or the network or a sponsor, sometimes you would need 50 copies, and they only made 5, so it meant that you had to have 10 times the script type 10 times, and if it was in a rush when you were in production, you'd have to have 10 people typing the script to get it done in an hour to have copies for everybody. So but you know what? We didn't know the difference, so we just said we had to do it. You couldn't wait until computers were invented, and they still did them, and we never complained, and we didn't know any better. And if you have only onions available, you eat them, and if you don't know anything about steak, you don't know that that's possible. So you work with what you have.
Something else you said, you're in semi-retirement, yet Real Kids, Real Adventures on Discovery netted you another Emmy Award.
It didn't. I'm
sorry, an Emmy nomination. Boy, if we could edit, this would be the magic of editing right here. I'm sorry, an Emmy nomination.
Well, listen, we were proud of that.
Yeah.
Because,
and so was the network, obviously.
You can't, it's like the Academy Awards. The people that are nominated for an Academy Award deserve as much recognition for their talent and ability and perseverance or whatever, because it's the luck of the draw, and sometimes the elections are political and whatnot. If it's distributed through one of the movie studios, they encourage everybody to vote for their. That's true anywhere. It's true in politics, but it's. Yes, it was fun to do that, and I did not work on production on that series. I only worked on the writing and producing of it, because I figured I'd serve my time standing out on a mountainside while we were trying to photograph getting a person out of an ice crevice and froze to death, and I had served my time doing those things, and now I try to concentrate on writing. That's one of the reasons I teach writing, because everything starts with the words on a page. You can't send a prop shopper out to buy props until you have a script. You just have to know what you're getting ready to do. And I think it is the creative process that starts everything, is the idea, wouldn't it be interesting if, and then writing the script about what you think it would be interesting if this would happen.
Well,
you
and
go,
I'm
you go
so
from there.
yeah, I'm so glad that you're still giving back by teaching that class, because obviously you have a passion for it, and you got in an early days at SMU had somebody that gets you going on that path, and that's a great thing. I have one last question. That is, what do you think about the changes at SMU? Where's this all heading, or where's education heading, in your opinion? Especially how's SMU changed? I mean, versus the first time you were here versus 2003. Where do you think it's going?
Well, there's so many. Well, this facility right here where we're talking hasn't been around but a year and a half now, or something like that. The opportunities keep increasing, and I think some of the other schools are doing interesting things. I'm working with a young fellow here that helps me with a lot of the mechanical things and getting shows ready. That it's funny, nostalgia is kind of in today, and so many shows that we've done as long ago as 1979 they're wanting to reissue and reuse today. He's in the engineering department here, engineering school here, and this summer he's going to be working with an engineering company, and he must work 3 semesters here in getting his degree. And I think that's terrific, because it's giving students a chance to get out and see what the industry is about, and what you make a lot of judgments when you work around a company. Among other things, you say, I had no idea they could be so disorganized, and everybody not knowing what they're doing, because the whole industry is new. Engineering is new, and I find that interesting. I suspect, I find it interesting because that's what I was trying to do with the course that I was teaching here. They've got to get out and talk to people in the industry and see it up close, not just to learn the techniques, but to learn how things work. I think that's probably the most important thing you can learn in college. Is in India they call it an aura, a person's aura, that there's something around you, that the way you speak, the way you attack problems, the way you handle yourself, the way you deal with people, that's just as important. I talk in a class and say the way you present yourself, meaning the way your image comes across, it's vitally important. Many times when we're employing someone new, we don't ask them how many courses they've taken or what they've done. We say, that person seemed kind of shifty, or something, whatever it is that you just don't feel comfortable with them. Let's go with this person. And we don't realize that our aura is 50% of what you're going to do with your life. And the success or failures you may have are related to your aura and how you handle yourself. If they can learn that, besides the techniques that they learn here, they have a far better chance. Sometimes, the old joke, where are all your A students that graduated? And you say, well, they're out working for the C students somehow. Because the aura what we were talking about there is the aura makes the difference, right, in what they do and how they handle their life. If we could teach them that, we could drop half the techniques that we teach them and try to spend time on that. And that's what I tried to do with the students, because you go in, and if you write a script and go in and talk about it, the way you talk about it to the people that you want to do it is 50%. Because you can't go in and say, I'm going to read my script to you. It's really boring to have somebody read their script. But you make the judgment, you say, I think that's an interesting idea that they wrote, and I think they can do it. I think they can rewrite it with the things that we want, and I think they will handle it. And those last things are more important sometimes than the idea itself. Or else they'll say, well, I'll option the idea, but we've got to get some other writers to come in and fix it. I can tell now they're not receptive to change. They're not receptive to suggestions. They don't know how to handle themselves.
Well, They're giving us the wrap up, but I'll tell you what, you're the right guy. And on behalf of SMU, I want to thank you for not only your bringing your expertise of 7 decades to SMU, but for really teaching the students right. I think you did a great job, and it was really a pleasure for me to get to know you and to see the technique and the craft that you brought. And I want to thank you.
Well,
very
you're
much.
you're not telling them that you came to the class and went out with them to help them with, sometimes they didn't know how to turn the equipment on, and you were always there teaching them and or helping them with it. You weren't teaching them, you were showing them. You were making them do it. And that's half the battle, David.
Well, thank you so much. And I appreciate it.